told the story before about this 10,000 acre ranch we have in Central California. It's easily the largest ranch in Central California, maybe the largest ranch in California, privately owned ranch. It's several square miles. Had never been surveyed as a unit. It was about 48, 50 parcels that this rancher had acquired over a 50-year period. Most of it hadn't been surveyed in 150 years since the original, we call them GLO surveyors, came through in the late 1850s, 1860s. There was hundreds of property corners on this particular ranch, numerous access roads, multiple structures, houses, barns, water towers, stock ponds, and no relationship between any of that stuff and the property lines. And so I was working with these folks, working with an attorney. They were doing the due diligence on this ranch, and they asked me. I said, "Hey, I really think you guys need to get a survey. Don't know how you're going to do a good job of due diligence if you guys don't get a survey." They said, "Well, how much for a survey?" I said, "Oh man." I took a look. I said, "It's going to take me 3 months to physically get to all these corners. It's going to be $100,000. That's order of magnitude, $100,000 to get this survey." And of course, they were surprised by that number. They weren't prepared for that. But I thought it was a realistic number. And the other thing I told them was like, "Look, you're going to pay $100,000 for this survey. And then I'm going to get up there and I'm going to find problems. I almost guarantee it. I will find a road that's not on your property, or I will find a building that is not on your property, or that's on your property and shouldn't be, or we're going to find out you don't have access to a pond or a creek that you thought you had access to for water." I said, "So you should set aside $100,000 for the survey." I said, "Then you should take another $200,000 or $150,000 and set that aside for your land attorney that I'm working with, because him and I are going to have to go fix this stuff." Now, the client was having a hard time with that. But here's how I tried to reason with him. And if you're involved in real estate, I want you to pay attention to this. This is really important. Most people would say we'd never spend $100,000 on a survey. But let's say that your client decided to do that. They were going to set aside $100,000 for a survey and $150,000 for legal work to clean up problems. So they were going to set aside $250K to get this cleaned up. This particular ranch was selling for $10 million. So $250,000 is 2.5% of the sale price. Okay, that's less than the typical real estate agent's commission on that deal. Okay, so I think that's a great value. I think there might be some people that disagree with me, but for 2.5%, less than one of the real estate agent's commissions, these guys could have got a good survey, marked all their corners, and got all their encroachment and land title and water right issues cleaned up. Okay. Now, who should pay for that? That's a good question. I think the seller should pay. Worst case scenario, the buyer and seller should split that cost. So here's what I told my buyer. I said, "Hey, go back to your seller and tell him he needs to knock off $250,000 off the purchase price." And I said, he doesn't know what he owns. He's not sure what he's selling. And I said, "You don't know what you're buying. How do you even know this ranch is worth $10 million if you don't know what you're buying?" I said, "Look, you think you're buying 10,000 acres. I said, the type of surveys we're dealing with and the age of the surveys." And I said, sorry about that. I said, you might have now 9,000 acres or 11,000 acres. You could be off by 10%. Easily 10%. I said, "I don't even know how you're assigning a price. So this guy doesn't know what he's got. He doesn't know what he's selling. Right?" So I said, "Go back and tell him you want $250,000 work knocked off the price so you can get the survey done." So they went and talked to the buyer. The buyer said, "Oh no, I'm not knocking that off the price." No. I said, "All right, I tell you what. We're trying to be creative to help our clients solve problems. That's what we do. That's part of what we try and do here at Redefined Horizons." I said, I called the attorney that I was working with. I tell the buyer they'll pay $10 million, but you want $250,000 of that set aside in an escrow account as a contingency in case we go out and find problems. And the buyer said no, he wasn't going to do that either. Now, I told my client, I said, "Hey, in my opinion, you should walk away from this deal." I said, "It's your choice." I said, "But I don't think it's a good idea for you to buy without a survey." If you're in a seller's market That can be a tough conversation to have. And I realize that. But you need to have it anyways. And a lot of buyers will work with you. If a lot of buyers don't understand they have a problem. They don't understand that they needed a survey. They don't understand that there could be encroachments. So you have that conversation with them. If you're working with a surveyor like me, I'll get on the phone with the seller. We can get on a conference call. Me and you and the seller and the buyer and their brokers or their attorneys, and we can talk through it. And I can explain why I think a survey is needed. And I can explain what it's going to cost. You should have that conversation with your seller. If you're in a seller's market, you may not get the seller to cover the cost of a survey and the other cleanup that's needed. If you're in a buyer's market, there's a good chance the seller's going to play ball, because if you don't ask, there's a possibility the next buyer's going to ask. And certainly, when you have land surveyors like me out trying to educate people in the real estate industry, that's going to become more and more common. So ask the buyer to cover the cost of that survey and the related legal cleanup that might have to happen. Now, there's a possibility that the buyer's going to say, you know what, I may not be able to sell to this guy, but I'll be able to sell to the next guy, and he won't ask because he doesn't know any better. And that's true. That might happen, but in a lot of cases that isn't the case, especially when you've got financing, if you're buying with a loan, because the lenders know better. And they're going to say, hey, we need a survey before we're going to give you a loan to buy this property. Now, in that case, I told you the buyer was paying cash. We didn't have a lender, so it wasn't an issue. And they were probably buying without title insurance too. So, buyers have the right to do that. I don't think that's smart. There's a lot of extra risk there, and it should certainly be reflected in the purchase price that you're paying for the property, that risk. So what are the lessons? What do we learn from this 10,000 acre ranch in California that haven't been surveyed in 150 years? Number one, don't pay millions of dollars for a large landholding if you don't know what is being sold. Your buyer and their broker has an obligation to know what they're selling you. Is it 10,000 acres or 9,000 acres? They should be able to answer that question with a reliable level of accuracy. So don't pay millions of dollars if you don't know what you're buying. Ask the seller to get a survey. Don't be bashful. If you can't get them to do that, put in a contingency in your purchase contracts that you can go back, claw back some money, or put some money in escrow to fix boundary and land title survey problems if you discover them within 6 months of the purchase or whatever it may be. And understand that a large landholding can't be properly valued if you don't know what's owned. So you need to ask these questions. Do you have legal access? Are there structures over the property line potentially? Is there unauthorized use of the property by neighbors of the public? Those are issues with large landholdings. Are there unwritten rights being developed by the neighbors? How much land are you really buying? You should be asking all of those questions when you're doing your due diligence on a large landholding. So don't spend millions of dollars on large landholdings in California without a survey. You need to know what you're buying. A lot of times the survey cost is going to be way less than the real estate broker's commission. In this case, it was about the same. It was about 3% because it was in a really bad area, but in a lot of cases, it won't be that much. It might be 1% or 2% of the purchase price. It's worth the money. Split that cost with your buyer. Split that cost with your seller. If you're in a buyer's market, make the seller cover the whole cost. He should know what he's selling you. He has an obligation to know what he's selling you. So, and get that survey, know exactly what you're paying for, make sure that you're getting your money and you're getting your value out of that purchase price.